Hey gang, long time no see. For any of those of you who are out there wondering what I'm doing, if I was ever going to make a video again, which is probably about 2 people. But so if you see some weird transitions, it's because it was just too long and I just flapped my gums too much, and so I cut stuff out. I'm kind of talking about 2 slightly related things in this video. The first one is I got a question from a YouTube user, apparently first name John, that he wanted me to, he sent me some pictures over the internet of, I think, pages or portions of Green's Interlinear Old Testament from Genesis. And he wanted me to talk about pronouncing the Hebrew words. So I figured I would do just a little kind of primer about basically how the eye scans Hebrew words. I don't intend for it to be a full-blown, like, you know, watch this video and then you'll be able to know how to read Hebrew. It's really just kind of an introduction to just how the eye sounds out, or how the eye scans Hebrew words. So that's kind of part 1, but then the passage that John kind of or the passages John brought to my attention that way, my spidey senses tell me that it's related to Arnold Murray's idea of the 8th day creation of Adam. And so this kind of second topic that's kind of related has to do with, and I know Arnold Murray isn't the only one who, you know, you hear about 8th day Adam from other places every once in a while, but I figured I would address that 8th day Adam issue, not in super high quality depth, but just kind of a couple quick reasons why the 8th day Adam idea it just won't fly. It just doesn't work in the face of Scripture, and in the face of the, you know, texts of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. I think without any delay what I can do is kind of switch camera angles and talk about some screen captures that I have here relative to sounding out Hebrew words, and then we can take a look at what John has handed us to take a look at. So, dissolve. Anyway, what I am going to start with is consonants in Hebrew. When you come to points in written Hebrew where you say to yourself, why is it so weird? Like, why is it so different from English or whatever other language we're looking at? But the thing is that it's written Hebrew did not originally include vowels. Like, there were not written vowels in Hebrew. And so every once in a while like if you pick up a Hebrew Bible, some of the things that are kind of particular to Hebrew, at least written Hebrew, are kind of artifacts of the fact that there were not written vowels in Hebrew initially. And so I figured maybe the best place to start would be consonants. And again, this is not an instructional video on reading Hebrew, it's just kind of going over some basic concepts. So here we go. So this is the Hebrew alphabet. Follow the shiny green pencil. Hebrew reads, unlike English, which reads left to right, Hebrew reads right to left, which I think probably a lot of people are familiar with, and I am pretty certain John out there, it seems to me that you are already aware of that, so I'm sorry to tell you what you already know. So we'll head this direction with the alphabet. We've got Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Tzadeh, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Sin, Tav. Couple of things to say about these letters relative to pronunciation and sounding words out. First off, for the most part, these letters are going to have some kind of consonant kind of sound. For instance, the bait, and see, even when I start, you might be wondering why I'm not talking about the first letter first. Well, there's a reason that will become clear in a moment. And actually, I probably even shouldn't start with bait, to be honest with you. I probably ought to start here with gimel. For instance, gimel makes the consonant sound g, like a G in English. Here's dalet. Dalet makes the consonant sound d, like a D in English. Here's hey. Hey makes the consonant sound h, like the H. But see, now it's getting complicated because it doesn't all the time. Sometimes the hey is silent, which I'll try to explain that in a minute. But for the most part, these consonants are going to make consonant sounds. But that's not true in all cases. Let me give you kind of an example if I can manage to reach around my camera tripod. Okay, there are some letters or some consonants, and yes, they're all consonants. So that's one thing that I think people get a little mixed up about with Hebrew is, and in particular in reference to Arnold Murray. Like, he will sometimes, for instance, he is all the time, and I think he does this just to simplify things for his audience, but he'll all the time refer to like Aleph as, or he used to, he has since passed away, I believe, but he used to talk about Aleph and say it's A, and which, I mean, I guess you can say it's A in the Hebrew alphabet, given that it's the first letter of the alphabet, so it's kind of like A, and it does sometimes go Ah, depending on what's going on, but that doesn't make it a vowel. I know A in English is a vowel, but Aleph in Hebrew is a consonant. Okay, so, and we'll talk about the difference there when we actually kind of start looking at a Hebrew word and kind of tracking how it sounded out. But anyway, I'm going to mark some words in here. There are some consonants here that do not any longer have what we would consider a consonant sound that they make. Now, they may have at one point had some kind of light consonantal kind of function in the language, but if they did, it's not certain and generally not really used, at least not to my knowledge. Some of those letters here, like for instance, Aleph, and I'll just highlight it in blue. I don't know if it'll read blue on YouTube or not, but Aleph, it does not have a consonant sound. It doesn't necessarily go ah. What it ends up doing functionally when you're sounding out a word is it's kind of, this is not quite appropriate to say, but the way to think of it almost might be that it's holding place for the vowel point that it is connected with. So if it, and we'll talk about vowel points in a second, but if it has a vowel point that goes ah under it, then it goes ah. If it has a vowel point under it or near it, around it, that goes O, then it goes O. But it doesn't really have a sound to itself. Now that doesn't make it unimportant, and that doesn't make it interchangeable with other things. If you have an Aleph there and you go to try to swap it with some other letter, you're going to change the word. It's going to become a different word. It doesn't mean it's swappable or addable or droppable or unimportant. It just means that it doesn't have a consonant sound of its own that it gives. So other letters that would be like that, oh, I just bumped the paper. Oh, no, we're okay. I bumped the paper. I thought it might have gone out of frame. Aleph is one that doesn't have a strict pronunciation. It just kind of, carries the vowel sound that it's connected to. Another one like that would be ayin right here. Same kind of thing. Let's see here. It's one of those things that it's you have to kind of stop and think when you're not looking at a word, when you're just looking at a set of letters. Bait has a sound, gimel, dalet, hey has a sound usually. Vav is another funny one, because Vav, it has a consonant sound, but it can also be... It's once you learn it, it's simple, but it's hard to explain. The letter Vav, the letter shape Vav, it sounds like a V. It goes V, usually. But it can also kind of become a placeholder for a vowel sound that it's associated with and not make the actual V sound. So that one is, I'll put a little question mark next to that one. That one's a little tricky. But Zion usually goes Z, Chet goes Chet. You know, Tet makes the T sound. Yod is another tricky one, which we'll get to in a second. It sometimes is silent. I'm sorry. It's complicated. Kaf usually is like a K sound, usually, but not all the time. Lamed, Mem, you know, L sound. Mem is like an M sound. Nun is an N sound. Samek, S sound. I think all the rest of these usually have, I mean, they have a consonant sound of their own. Aleph and Ayin, though, do not have a consonant sound of their own. They are representing a vowel sound, but that doesn't make them vowels in Hebrew. They are not vowels, but they are usually representing a vowel sound. And you know what vowel sound it is based on what vowel point it's connected to. And we'll get to that in a second. Now, some other letters that get tricky. And we'll move to pink for these. These are ones that receive a dagesh, and I'll say what that is in a second. They receive a dagesh, and the dagesh makes them change sound. What on earth is a dagesh? Well, dagesh is I think that'll show up. Yeah, I think that's showing up pink. That little dot in the middle of the bait there. It's called a dagesh, and it shows up for a variety of reasons involving grammar that I won't go into, but the long and short of it is that most of the Hebrew consonants can receive a dagesh. There are some that do not, but most of them can receive it if the kind of the grammar requires it. Most of them, it doesn't change the sound at all. Like, for instance, Aleph can receive a dagesh, but it doesn't really change how you would sound out the word. But with some of them, it does change how you sound out the word. For instance, bait here, the letter bait, if it has the dagesh, it makes the B sound. If it does not have the dagesh, it makes the V sound. You know, like V. So with dagesh goes B, without dagesh goes V. So that's a little bit tricky. Same here with kaf. You see, it has, whoops, there we go. It has the dagesh here in the printout, but it does not always have the dagesh in words. But there again, if it can take a dagesh, and if it does take a dagesh, it'll sound different. If it has the dagesh, it'll make a K sound. If it does not, it'll make a similar sound as like the chet here. It'll go, you know, kind of like if you're talking to a German person and they go Bach, you know, for Bach, you know, the composer. It's kind of the phlegmy K. So there you go. And oh, another one here is the P here. When it has the dagesh, it makes the same sound as P in English. If it does not have the dagesh, it makes the same sound as F in English. So those get tricky too. Other things that can be tricky, and I'm sure I'm not covering all the tricky stuff with consonants, but I'm trying to just kind of tip my hat to some of them. You know, it gets tricky. But the long and short of it is these are the consonants. There are some tricky things involved, but for the most part, they make consonant sounds, with the exception of those that stand in kind of for vowel sounds sometimes, but you will be clued into that by the vowel points, which brings us then to vowel points. So I will dissolve to the vowel point chart. Hello again. I'm glad you stayed. This is the vowel point chart. I'm trying to get it as into frame as I can and have it be easily readable. Yes, and here's where things get weirder. The Hebrew vowel point system, again, it's one of those things that, believe it or not, it just becomes second nature when you get used to it. But when you sit down to try to explain it, it sounds very, very complicated. But the long and short of it is, again, written Hebrew did not have, old written Hebrew did not have written vowels. And so rather than that, they came up with kind of dots. Dots to put in, under or sometimes beside or above the consonants to signify vowel sounds. So, having said that, and again, you will notice, I think you can see on the screen, that these are broken into classes. Like we have A class, and EI class, and OU class. And the idea here is these different points make similar sounds, like the same class sounds. So anyway, let's talk about these. Now, you've got a consonant here, you've got the mem, and that's just there to give you a reference for the vowel point, so you can see where the vowel point would be relative to the consonant. Don't worry about the mem. We're looking at the dots and shapes in and around the mem. So all of these vowel points have their own name. I'm not going to burden you with that at the moment. Basically, these three vowel points here, and you see they're under the consonant. They all go ah. They all go ah. And so what happens, like generally speaking, when you're reading a Hebrew word, how your eye scans is first your eye pays attention to the consonant. So first your eye looks at the consonant. And then your eye looks at the vowel point it's connected to. So like in this case, you've got a mem, and then you've got this vowel point that goes ah. And so you would read that together as a syllable, basically. So you'd go mem, which makes the M sound and then you've got this vowel point that goes ah, so together that would be ma. So your eye, when you go to scan it, you start with the consonant. Generally, except for some of those funny exceptions I talked about, your mouth will make whatever consonant sound goes with it, and then you'll look at the vowel point that goes along with it. And often, like if you look at these, most of them are underneath. There are some that are not, but most of them are underneath. Your eye will drop underneath the consonant and then make whatever vowel sound that represents. So like in this case, it's ma. Same thing here, ma. Same thing here, ma, because all these three all go ah. Okay? Now we drop down a class to the EI class, and this is a Hirik, and it goes E, kind of the long E sound. So you'd look at the consonant, go then look at the vowel point. This one goes E, so it would be me. Okay, now it does get a little tricky. Here we've got remember, if you recall from a little bit ago, I was saying that the yod usually goes ya, but not always. Sometimes it stands in for, or it would have been standing in for, a vowel sound. This is an example of that. This is a vowel, like the Hirik, or no, I'm sorry, this is the Hirik. The Hirik and the yod are working together here. They're a team, and it's actually called Hirik Yod. Basically, when you have this scenario, this is not making a sound. The yo in this situation is not making a sound. It's just understood that it's working with that vowel point. Now, why do you have a letter that doesn't make a sound? Well, remember, originally that vowel point wasn't there. So it was kind of a tip of the hat to the reader that there's a vowel sound, it's kind of standing in for a vowel sound. It would have been representing a vowel sound, sort of, before the vowel points. But now we clarify that with the actual vowel point. But this then does not make a sound. So you'll find that every once in a while. This one is zere, it goes A, long A sound. Same thing here, zere yod, same thing as over here. The yod is not going to make the sound here, it's just teaming up with the vowel point. So there you go. And then these vowel points both make the same sound, they both go eh. Down here in the OU class, I should probably kind of sound these out. Like if you're treating this whole package as a syllable, it would be me, may, meh, meh. And again, it would be the consonant is pronounced first, and then the vowel point that's with it. So e, me. So the I looks at this first and then checks out the vowel point after. Usually, okay? Here's the OU class. This is called holum. This vowel point right here, it's holum. And it's a little different because it's not over here. It's not under the letter, it's up here. And it goes O, long O sound. So you read the mem, you read the vowel point, it's O, mo. This, oh wait, look, that looks like a consonant. Oh, it may look like a consonant, and it kind of is a consonant, but in this case it's not making a consonant sound. It's like the hirik yod up here. It's teaming up with the holum. It's teaming up with the holum to make a vowel sound. Again, you can kind of think of it as an artifact of when there were no vowel points, and no written vowels. So this is holum vav. It's holum vav, and this whole package together, holum vav together, it just goes O, just like the regular holum. Okay, so reading this together, you'd read the consonant, and then you'd read the vowel O. So O, mo. Okay, now this here looks very much like this, except you'll notice the dot is in a different place. And again, this would be a vav consonant, but again, it's not serving as a consonant sound. It's teaming up with the vowel point, and this is actually, this is a funny one, because it's this one's hirik yod, sere od, holum vav, but this one, the vav gets no respect. This one is just called shurik. So, why? I don't know, but that's what it's called. And it goes oo. It goes oo. So like consonant, mem, oo, moo, like the cow. This is another vowel point. If I'm remembering correctly, it's called kibbutz. It also goes o. Or no, I'm sorry, it goes oo. It goes ooh. Why have this and this? Yeah, I don't know. That's just just how it works. But so you'd read the mem, and the ooh, and together it goes moo, like the cow. And this one, John, I will tell you, this one, when I was learning Hebrew, was the bane of my existence, because it looks like these two up here. You look at it and you think to yourself, it has all the markings of an ah sound, but oh no, it is not an ah sound, it is O. It goes O. So just like this and just like this one goes O. At some point, were they slightly different vowel sounds? I don't know, maybe, but now when you go to read it, this says mo, this says mo, and this also says mo. So there you go. And then this one is This one's silly. It just is. This one is tricky because it can make kind of a vowel sound, just a very weak kind of. I don't know if the word schwa means anything to you, like like if you look up a dictionary and you see, is that on screen? No, it's not on screen. If you, where can I write this where it's on screen? I'm sorry, like I'm doing this one take, so I'm sorry for all the nonsense. But if you ever see like an upside down E in a phonetic print, writing of something like in a dictionary, if I remember correctly, it's called a schwa, and it's just kind of a non-distinct vowel sound, just to kind of like a just a very weak and this one can sometimes make a very weak sound, but it also sometimes kind of marks the end of a syllable, where it's not going to make any particular vowel sound. It's just kind of like a little sign saying hello, end of syllable. How do you know the difference? Just, with practice. I know that's irritating, but that's just kind of how it is. So, so those are the vowels. But again, kind of the takeaway thing is that the way your eye scans is your eye scans consonant and then vowel point. Okay, consonant, vowel point, and it just, so your eye will kind of be reading like zigzaggy. Your eye is going to be kind of going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down as it reads the word. And I know it sounds bizarre if you're not accustomed to Hebrew, but if you do it enough, it does become second nature. Okay, this is actually my second take of this. For some reason, the video, the first one, had cut the first chunk of it off. Not entirely sure why, so this is my second pass at it. But what we see here are some screen captures of the pictures that John sent. This is from John, not John, I'm talking about John, but this is from Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26, and what he has highlighted here in the gray is what he wanted me to talk about in particular in terms of pronunciation. And if you recall what we've already talked about, given how you pronounce things, you start with the consonant. Here we have Aleph. But as we mentioned earlier, Aleph doesn't really have a consonant sound that it's going to make, so you move on down to the vowel point, which is going to go ah. So this is ah. Then you're up to the next consonant, which is dalet. It makes the D sound, and then it has the same vowel point as this, still ah. So that's da. And this highlighted feature here, I'm not sure if you can, maybe I can zoom it in a little bit. Might be able to see, oh, and then we lose focus. I think that's about as good as I'm going to be able to get the picture. You can't really see the mark very clearly in this print off, but what it is, it's not a vowel point. It's something called a cantillation mark. And what that is in time the Hebrew people, or the Jewish people, developed a means of kind of chanting the Hebrew scriptures, and they had cantillation marks to kind of guide the chant, how the chant went, and they don't impact pronunciation of the word. They occasionally can help with, I guess you'd say, interpretation a little bit, at least insofar as sometimes, depending on what kind of cantillation mark you're looking at, it might help you understand where they understood kind of breaks in the idea, like, okay, now the statement's moving on to a new idea, or it can help clarify what they understood to be related terms, terms that were relating to each other or describing each other. But when it just comes down to reading the Hebrew, the cantillation marks don't really do anything. So how do you tell the difference? Well, you just, if you're familiar with the vowel points, then you will be, what's not a vowel point is a cantillation mark, basically. Cantillation mark doesn't impact pronunciation. So you've got Aleph, then so that just goes then you've got dalet, the same vowel point, so that's da, and then the letter mem, which if you you may be familiar with this, John, I'm not sure, but another tricky thing about Hebrew is that sometimes there are a few letters in a few consonants in Hebrew that when they appear at the end of a word, they change shape. They have a terminal form, an end of the word form, and this is the end of the word mem. So when you see M elsewhere in a word, it looks like this. But when M shows up at the end of a word, or did I say M? I meant mem. I'm not sure what I said. When mem shows up at the end of a word, it looks like this. So anyway, what you have here is Adam. Okay, so Adam. These together, the dalet, the vowel point, and the mem make a syllable dam. So Adam. Of course, where we get the English name Adam, and in Hebrew just kind of means generic for man, but generally used in kind of a universal sense, like kind of more in the sense of mankind. Now that's not always true, but it has a bit more of a flavor of mankind than just kind of an individual man, which the word more generally used for just kind of an individual man would be ish in Hebrew, and Adam tends to be more a little bit more the sense of just of humanity, or kind of a generic kind of all-encompassing idea of man. Now this is the other one that John wanted us to take a look at. This is in Genesis 1:27, and basically same sort of thing, except we do have one cantillation mark. Let me make sure I don't go off screen. We do have one cantillation mark right here, so that mark will not impact the pronunciation. So we've got aleph, which makes no consonant sound, and then segol, which is the sound eh, and then the tav, which goes t like a T, so et. Okay, and this is kind of an interesting, I guess you could call it word. Sometimes it's called a particle. Most of the time when it's used, it's not translatable. What it does, it marks the following word as a definite direct object. Now, what on earth is a definite direct object? Well, I'm going to slide my paper up here, and I have an English sentence. Okay, I hit the ball. A direct object is the word that receives the action of the sentence. I like to think of it as it answers the question what in terms of the verb. So, I hit. What did I hit? Ball. So that's the direct object. But in English, this here, the word the, is a definite article. Okay, so it's a definite article. It's not just any ball, it's the ball. You know, a particular ball. And so this kind of operating together would be a definite direct object. Well, the et usually in Hebrew signifies that the following word is being used as a definite direct object. Now sometimes it's used differently. Every once in a while you'll find it used in a way where it's essentially being used like the English word with, and so sometimes it'll end up getting translated with, but most of the time it's an untranslatable kind of grammar flag, meaning the next word is a definite direct object. So we've got et, and then here we've got hey and the vowel point, so it's going to go ha, and then the rest of this is just the same that we saw earlier, Adam. So it's et ha Adam, and the hey here, along with that vowel point, that's serving as a direct object. It's kind of like the, oh wait, I'm sorry, not direct object, a definite article, I mean. It's serving as a definite article, like the word the. Okay, so this is operating like the, so it's as if it's saying the man. Okay, And all this is doing is saying, hello, this word here is a definite direct object. So that's how you pronounce this, et ha-adam. Okay? Now, there was another passage John wanted us to look at, so I will just zoop, move it over. Now this is Genesis 2, verse 7. Let me straighten it up for you. Genesis 2, verse 7, and what we see here is exactly the same as what we saw just a moment ago. Et ha-adam. And it has the same cantillation mark here. That does not impact the pronunciation at all. It's the same word, et ha-adam. It's being used the same way. Ha-adam is a definite direct object, and it has the et there to just kind of make it very clear that it is a definite direct object. In the verse 9 then, he wanted this to be looked at again, and it's the same thing, et ha-adam. The only difference is that we have an extra cantillation mark here. It doesn't affect the pronunciation at all. It doesn't affect the meaning at all. It just kind of, it's working. What it's actually doing is, this is a kind of like a bookend for the cantor, the one who's chanting the line, and the other one is here. So this is like a bookend here, a bookend here. It's just kind of, if I remember the cantillation marks correctly, and I could be wrong about this, but it's just saying that these three Hebrew words, or four if you count the et, but you know, we don't need to count it necessarily as a word, but these words together are kind of grouped together. So we've got Vayashem Sham et Ha'adam. And so this is just kind of a phrase grouped, words grouped together as a phrase, and so the cantor presumably would chant these words in a particular way because they're a phrase grouped together. But it doesn't impact how we just plain read the word. So I don't know if you noticed that was there, John, and it wasn't elsewhere with et ha'adam, but don't worry about it. It doesn't change anything about how we pronounce it or what it means or anything. It's just a cantillation mark. So those are the items that John in particular wanted to take a look at. And now I can shift gears to talk about the 8th day creation of Adam that Arnold Murray supposes. Okay, just a few things to talk about with Arnold Murray's concept. And he's not the only one who has this concept, but he's probably the one, or he was prior to his passing away, the one most in the public eye concerning actually teaching an 8th day Adam creation, which if you're watching and you're unfamiliar, the concept is pretty well talked about in some videos on YouTube that I will create links for down in the description underneath this image here. But Arnold Murray's concept, as I understand it from what I've heard him say, is that essentially in Genesis 1, when God says, let us make man in our image, that the mankind that he created on that 6th day, as represented in Genesis 1, was a man and a woman for every race on the planet, but not the Adam of the Garden of Eden. He will say that the Adam from the Garden of Eden, the figure we think of as Adam, that he was created on the 8th day, that God created mankind, the races, a bunch of them, pairs, a whole bunch of pairs for every race there is. On the 6th day, 7th day, God rested, according to Murray, and then the 8th day, according to Murray, God created then the Adam of Adam and Eve and the garden and whatnot. He banks his whole argument almost entirely on the use of et ha-adam in Genesis 2. And his argument is, and this is this is Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, which is just the edition of the Hebrew Bible that anyone's going to use. If you went to take seminary class and they made you buy a copy of the Hebrew Old Testament, this is what they'd make you buy. or have you by. So here I am, and I hope you can see this clearly. The print is very small. I tried to zoom in on it as best I could. But this is chapter 1 of Genesis, verse 26. And what it says here in Hebrew is, Vayomer Elohim na'aseh Adam, Betzal Menu. Okay, now what that is in English is, and he said, God, and the verbs and subjects usually in Hebrew are reverse of what it is in English. The verb usually comes before the subject. The action usually comes before the actor in a Hebrew sentence. It does not always, though. Sometimes for emphasis, they will shift that around. But so this is saying, God said, okay, God said, let us make man, Adam, man, in our image. Okay? Now, Arnold Murray is saying, aha, look here. God is saying, not, wait, I think my pencil's not, there we go. That's what I get for trying to split my eyes between the screen I'm looking at and the page I'm looking at. So, he's saying, look, this is not ha-Adam, or actually he would say, this is not et ha-Adam being used here, this is Adam. So, aha, that's something different, because in Genesis 2, when God forms Adam from the dust of the ground, the term used is et ha-Adam. So et ha-Adam is different from Adam. Okay? So that is pretty much the only, to my knowledge, the only substance for his argument for Adam being created on day 8. Except for the fact that, the narratives as they're laid out in Genesis, you've got kind of the Genesis 1 narrative of creation, and then you've got a Genesis 2 narrative of creation. Now, most people will see that to one degree or another as two narratives, talking about essentially the same event. Okay, now some people will say that it's two pretty distinct creation stories that have been brought together into the traditional Hebrew text. Some people will just say we've got one story that tells the big picture and one story that tells kind of the finer detail of the creation of mankind and like the relationship mankind had with God there before the fall. So that's the more general concept of it. Arnold Murray doesn't see it that way. He just sees the stories just continuing in a linear fashion. So the fact that in Genesis 2 now God is shaping et ha-Adam, that to him means this is now day 8. But anyway, the bulk of his argument is it says Adam here, okay, then God said, let us make Adam. Okay, now here is a major problem with that. If you come down here to verse 27, let me move that up a bit. If you come down here to verse 27, it's right on the heels of 26. God said, let us create man in our image, and talks a bit more about that. The very next verse is Vayivra Elohim et ha-Adam. Okay, now it says, and he created, God, and God created et ha-Adam. There it is. In chapter 1, verse 27, et ha-Adam. Now, if Murray's whole argument is et ha-Adam means the Adam of the Garden of Eve, and Adam means something different, he's got a major problem here. Because here's et ha-Adam. Right after God says, let us create man in our image, the very next sentence is, and God created et ha-Adam. So that's a major problem. Actually, in the videos that I'll provide a link for, at least I'll try to, in the description. This later in his ministry, he provides what I consider just a lame excuse for this. His argument is that verse 27 here, chapter 1, verse 27, is actually God forecasting that Jesus would be made in his image, in God's image, late, like thousands of years later. the problem is, to believe that, you have to accept a whole host of weird doctrines from Murray. You have to accept his concept of first earth age, which is pretty crazy. You have to accept his concept of pre-existence as a spiritual body, which is pretty crazy. You have to accept that the people are created not in the image of God, but in the image of their spirit body and pre-existence, which is pretty crazy. You also have to accept an anti-Trinitarian doctrine that Jesus is not the eternal Word, the eternal Son of God who eternally coexisted with the Father and the Holy Spirit, but rather he is a being made in the image of the eternal God, in the same or similar manner as other people are made in the image of their spirit bodies from pre-existence. So in order to accept that, you have to accept a whole host of weird things from Murray. But here's one, I'm sorry, I bumped the camera. Here's one major problem with it, just with the grammar. Here it is. The verb here in verse 27, it's vayivra, and it is it's a third-person masculine imperfect form of the verb meaning to create. Okay, but it's also something we call vav consecutive, which means that it's essentially a narrative version of a past tense. This is kind of a simple way to put it. So if he's saying that this is like a forecast of God making Jesus in his image somehow, and that's how he gets away with using et ha-adam here, this is a past tense. And furthermore, it makes no sense in the context of this chapter at all. But he has to do something with it because he has to explain away. In his concept, et ha-adam means Adam of the Garden of Eden. And he can't have that, or he has to throw away his whole eighth-day Adam creation teaching. So he has to come up with something to do away with this, to explain this. And so he comes up with a very, very strange thing about Adam and or about Jesus, and it's just it kind of boggles my mind in terms of, you have to accept every strange doctrine of him to even begin to read the passage that way. It's so bizarre. Okay, one thing I'd like to point out, again, just in terms of the Murray's idea of et ha-adam meaning Adam, as in the Garden of Eden Adam, and Adam meaning kind of other mankind, like created on a different day. It's something to point out here, that whole concept, it just doesn't work. And if you're reading through the first several chapters of Genesis in Hebrew, it's plain to you that it just doesn't work. It just can't. And just another example that is, I'm now in Genesis 4 verse 25. Okay, and I hope I'm zoomed in enough that you can see this. What it says here in chapter 4, verse 25, it says, Vayeda Adam od et ishto. Okay? So this is kind of like a sentence, okay? And it is, and Adam knew again his wife, okay? His woman, his wife. Okay, but what I want to draw particular attention to is this. Okay, it is not Vayeda ha-adam. It's not ha-adam knew again his wife. It is Vayeda Adam od et ishto. Okay, it is Adam knew his wife again. And then it says, Vayteled Bain Vatikra et Shemo Shet, which is, well, I just lost my place. Here we go. And she, begat, she had a son, and she called his name Seth. Okay, so this is very clearly Adam and Eve having Seth, conceiving and giving birth to Seth. Okay, very plainly. And what name is used here, what word is used here for Adam? It's Adam. It's not Ha-Adam, not Et Ha-Adam, which wouldn't make sense anyway because it's the subject of this phrase or of this clause. It's not a direct object, so it wouldn't be Et Ha-Adam anyway. But, it's not Ha-Adam, it's Adam. So if you're like Murray and you're approaching it from the concept that Adam means people made in day 6, and that Ha-Adam means Adam of the Garden of Eden, won't fly. Because right here, very plainly, Adam is conceiving and then Eve is giving birth to Seth. And the word in Hebrew used is Adam, not Ha-Adam. And then also, what I want to add to that was it doesn't make any sense because in the rest of the biblical canon, okay, it is assumed that, or not just assumed, it's directly stated that all people came from Adam. Okay, for instance, Acts 17:26. Okay, it makes it very clear that all the nations, I'm looking at my computer screen to make sure I get the wording right. And he, God, made from one every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. Okay, that doesn't make any sense with 6-day races and then 8th-day Adam. Okay, so I guess Acts 17's wrong. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. It also doesn't make any sense when Peter in his letters is talking about Noah, and that that 8 souls were saved from there. If you watch Murray when he refers to that passage, he always wants to sneak in the word 8 Adamic souls, and it's just not there. And so, but he has to sneak it in for his whole concept to be correct. Okay, but it's not there. And then you read Romans 5, where Paul is kind of juxtaposing the fall of Adam with the salvation that's in Christ, the justification that's in Christ, and that doesn't really make sense. The statements he makes about through one man's sin, death went to all for all sin. I mean, it doesn't make much sense if Adam is actually only the father of a set of people rather than all people. And so the whole thing, the whole 8th-day Adam thing doesn't make any sense from top to bottom. It doesn't make any sense in Genesis 1 and 2. It doesn't make any sense in Genesis 4. It doesn't make any sense in Acts 17. It doesn't make any sense in the letters of Peter. It doesn't make any sense in Romans 5. It just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. It just doesn't. And I really think that the way Murray builds his argument is he has the idea, either someone gave him the idea or he came up with the idea of 8th-day Adam for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know why you would come up with that particular idea, but he had the idea and then he tried to back it up with Hebrew, and he found a little nugget called Et Ha-Adam, and he latched onto that. And then someone, and again, this is my reconstruction, I don't know this for sure, and then someone clued him in, hey, Arnold, it's there in Genesis 1:27 too, what you going to do with that? And then he came up with this convoluted thing about it being a reference to Jesus. But in order to believe that, you got to believe you got to believe the whole Murray package. You got to believe the whole, the first Earth age. You've got to believe the whole spiritual bodies prior to existence. You've got to believe the whole, like, people existed as spiritual bodies and then were created in their own image, on day 6. You gotta believe that Jesus is the physical body created in the image of God instead of, second person of the Trinity incarnate. You gotta believe just this whole package of crazy Murray doctrine to believe his argument there. And it just, the whole thing, it doesn't stand up to the rest of canon, it doesn't stand up to Genesis, it doesn't stand up to the grammar, it just falls down. It doesn't stand, it falls. So the whole the whole 8th day creation of Adam story is just, I hereby officially call it malarkey for a variety of reasons. So anyway, so John, thanks for your question. So hopefully you'll have some kind of video that's some kind of helpful to you. So thanks very much, and to all of you in the YouTube verse, hello.